All right, greetings everyone, and welcome to the presentation that will hopefully help answer all of your questions about the final exam for our course. By this point, I hope that you've been working on the exam prep. I hope also that you've looked at the final exam and that, remember, at any time you can always email me and ask questions. Keep in mind the due date. It's due next Friday, May 15th at 10:50 in the morning. It's due in the assignment folder, and no late exams will be accepted. All right, I'm going to walk through the exam and also all of the grading criteria. So your first question is about how you've learned to read critically this semester. So there's two parts to this question. There's A and there's B. So in A, it's asking about your ability to read at a college level, read as a scholar. So what have you learned this semester about reading at the college level, about strategies and tips and what college reading looks like? What kind of thinking should you be doing as you're reading? Those are the kinds of things you should be addressing in 1A. As far as length requirements, again, you should be thinking about a page. Again, we're talking double-spaced and a normal font size. B is an application. This will take you longer because you have to apply the bulleted questions in step 3 to 2 different texts. So first of all, you're going to choose a difficult article. So some of the examples that I've given here will help you choose. The Yes article was certainly the hardest thing we read all semester. The Lost City That Isn't, that was the RAF article, also difficult. The Media FAQ and the Letter from International Scholars, I would kind of take those together. And then the Icon Columbus article, that was the one where they speculated as to how Christopher Columbus became such a symbol of a hero. Okay, so pick one of those texts, maybe your favorite, or maybe the most difficult one for you, and then you're going to answer the questions in step 3. What skills did you learn? What study skills were necessary in order to break it down? What did you learn from the text? And then how does curiosity intersect with your critical reading of that text? Then you're going to choose one of the final chapters from The Lost City of the Monkey God. You have chapter 25, 26, or 27. Pick one of those and then answer the same questions in step 3 for that chapter. So this part B has 2 sections to it. Now I'm going to show you the grading criteria for question 1A. Again, a cohesive response. Cohesive means everything sticks together well, it all goes together, that focuses on the different aspects of reading critically. You can see in parentheses, I've given you some ideas of what to talk about. How do you break down a text? How do you identify the main points? Why is questioning important? Why is it important to determine the purpose, tone, and bias, and how does that relate to identifying the main point? Recognizing rhetoric, how do you recognize an argument? Annotation strategies, what kind of annotation strategies do college students or should college students use, and what kind of note-taking strategies are the most helpful? Then you need to make sure that you're also being graded on how you understand what being a scholar is. So you can see there's a couple different criteria. You're either going to write something that exceeds expectations, and that is scoring 17 to 20 points. Meeting expectations is 14 to 16. Approaches is 12 to 13. And not meeting expectations is scoring 11 or lower. This first question, 1A, is out of 20 points. The entire exam is out of 100, so that helps you kind of keep track. Grading of 1B. Again, you can see that it's broken down into section 1, the article, and section 2, the textbook chapter. You can see the different questions that you're supposed to address with each one and how they are on the rubric. You can see each one there. They're just listed as statements now. So before they were questions that you should address, and now they're statements. So pay attention, maybe pause the presentation here and see how you're being graded for 1B, the application of critical reading. Then question 2, explain in great detail what you learned while reading The Lost City of the Monkey God and all the companion readings. What have you learned about history, geography, archaeology, science, viruses, and parasites? We have talked about all of these things this semester. When we talk about history, we mostly focused on Honduran history, but as well as like Mayan history and pre-Columbian history and post-Columbian history. Those are the things we kind of focused on. Geography, how did we learn like the different elements of geography and how that intersected with how the expedition struggled to research T1. Think about archaeology. What did you learn about how an archaeologist goes about excavating a site? So you should be thinking of that first chapter we read from a textbook, as well as all of the controversy between Chris Fisher and the expedition, as well as Chris Begley and Joyce. Science, what have you learned about LIDAR and all the different scientific things that went in? Here you could really branch into going back into geography and archaeology, but you could also branch forward because science is also microbiology, and that has to do with viruses and parasites. So what have you learned about those? Okay, and great detail means you're being specific, which you'll see on the grading of number 2. So cohesive response again, that demonstrates what was learned about each topic. You should take them one at a time. And then specific examples from the book and the companion reading. So in other words, you want to say, I learned about archaeology, about, I don't know, let's say you talk about the test sites and how they excavate and how they dig those little test samples to see the scope of what they find. And then maybe you want to talk about how you learned that in the textbook chapter, and maybe you also want to reference the Lost City of the Monkey God when you're talking about how Chris Fisher was excavating the cache. So things like that, right? Be specific in how you refer to what you've learned. So again, out of 20, you can see the breakdown for how your answer will meet, exceed, approach, or not meet expectations. Okay, question 3. This one is probably the hardest one. Because it's a text to world connection, right? So relate all of the learning that you obtained. So this means look at what you learned in question 2 and relate it to the world today. What implications does this learning have on our society? What do you think is the most important takeaway? So in other words, those 2 questions are what you're going to combine to form your thesis. What's the most important takeaway about what Preston says are the implications on our society in regards to the book? For that, I'm going to want you to look at page 302. I would actually suggest rereading from page 301, where it says archaeology contains many cautionary tales for us to ponder. And specifically, I want you to look at the very last paragraph of the entire book. No civilization has survived forever. All move towards dissolution, one after the other, like waves of the sea falling upon the shore. None, including ours, is exempt from the universal fate. You could argue that that is Preston's thesis for the entire book. So really, this book is a persuasive text. He was telling us a story of the expedition into T1. He was also teaching us. So it's expository because it's also teaching us about LIDAR and about archaeology and about academic controversy. And then it was also using lots of descriptions so that we could picture the jungle and picture that fertile ants and all the different things they encountered. But then ultimately, the book is persuasive because what he's trying for us to understand is that civilizations have been falling since the beginning of time. Right? If you look at any big civilization that's ever existed, it has had a rise and a fall. Look at Rome, right? Look at ancient Greece. Look at all of the different empires that have ever existed. And so if you think of T1 as an empire, right? Or maybe you're looking at the Mayan Empire, how did they fall? Versus the one on Easter's Island, how did they fall? There's a lot of similarities between the end of the Mayan realm as well as the end of Easter's Island, right? But they're different than what happened in T1, where Easter's Island and the Mayan civilizations tended to degrade their environments to the point where there was nothing left, so their people starved. You have T1 that was thriving and flourishing, and all of a sudden this huge epidemic of disease just wiped them out. And so their society ended a different way, just like some of the other native societies that existed at this time when Columbus landed also faced the same fate as T1, as the City of the Jaguar, same thing. So what do we learn about that, and what are the implications on our society? This question was written specifically with the current pandemic in mind. A lot of you talked about in your discussion board post your connections between Preston telling you that another pandemic was imminent and then the fact that we're in one and how that is changing. Look at the impacts it's having on our society, on the societies around the world. How is that impacting everything? So text to world connections. Take the book, take the article Easter's Island, take the awful truth about archaeology and how we learn about our past. You can even look at those, the zoomed in example in that article, and then pick 2 other texts that help you springboard and formulate this answer of how the most important takeaway from the book, how that is really this text to world connection. It's time to put your head up and look around. Everything that you've learned this semester about what happened in Honduras, about what happened when Columbus landed, about what happened in the Mayan realm, everything that you've learned, how do you see that connecting to what's happening now? It's a really good question because it really should provoke a lot of thinking. I'm excited to see your answer to number 3 because I think this one's going to challenge you the most. Then the grading of number 3, again, you need to have a clear thesis that really helps understand how the most important takeaway from the book, how it has implications to our society. You can certainly look at Preston's thesis again for inspiration, and then that you're supporting this with specifics. Okay, overall, that's your assignment. That's how you're going to be graded. Here's some final advice: be thorough and specific. One of the problems with your discussion board posts is that you're so general. It's still, even in this last discussion board, so many of you are so general and saying like very huge statements about what happened at the very end of the book. It was neat when they went back and saw how different the jungle was. Well, that doesn't even tell me you really read it. What happened? How was the jungle different? Provide textual evidence that shows me how different the jungle was, right? Be proud of what you submit, meaning watch your grammar. You want to make sure that you're turning in something that shows and demonstrates your ability to do college level work. When you finish this class, you are ready for college level work. I am saying that you are when you finish this class. So show me that. Show me that I am right, that you're ready by being proud of what you submit, checking your grammar, turning in the most pretty, polished, perfect answer that you possibly can. Again, last reminder of this, your final is due Friday, May 15th at 10:50. No late exams will be accepted. Get it done as soon as you can and then get it submitted. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Good luck on your final exam. I can't wait to read your answers. It's been a wonderful semester. You've worked hard. You've been forced to adapt. I think that would be another interesting thing to talk about in number 3 is that whole idea of adaptation and how that matters. And I think a lot of you have done a really good job. You've learned a lot about yourselves and a lot about each other during this switch to online. And I want to commend you for your efforts. Thank you for everything you've done. Let me know if I can help you in the future. Come see me in the fall. Let's hope we're all back on campus. Stay well, stay healthy, and let me know how I can help you.